Well, fittingly today, the title of today's sermon, God Sees Us Through the Storm. I remember as a child right outside of Parkersburg, West Virginia, my mom and I lived in a town in Ohio. And it's a little town of about 600 people. And about 400 of those 600 were Amish. This is the town where I learned not to ride your bike behind the horse and buggy. And in this town, we bought the tallest building, which used to be the old bank. It was the only 3-story building in town. And so outside my window, about 20 feet up, was the siren that said, we need the volunteer fire department to come. Anybody ever hear those go off? It's loud. And it was about 20 feet outside my window. My mom knew that I was a rambunctious kid, and so she put my room upstairs in the old attic of the building. So you had to pull the stairs down. So that way she made sure I didn't sneak out at night, so she put the stairs up every night. And in order for me to get down, I'd have to create quite a racket. But anyway, I'm moving in, and as we're moving into this thing, I'm 12 years old. No one told me about the siren. And it was the first Wednesday of the month. And noon came. And I was up there. And the siren went off. It's the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. I dropped straight to my knees thinking the rapture had happened. And guess what? I was still here. And I was 12 years old. I was scared to death. So like any 12-year-old boy or whatever, I'm thinking, I'll go find everybody, see who else. I went running downstairs. I'm crying. I'm serious. I think the rapture has happened. And I'm running around. Can't find anybody. So I run outside. What I didn't know is everybody had stopped for lunch. They were out back eating. So I come around outside, and here comes my mother, and all I could scream to her was, "Oh, you're here too." You know, that kind of thing. And she began to explain to me about the siren. No, it's once a month they test it, but if they need the volunteer fire department, it has to be heard like with 5 miles or 7 miles away. All I know is my room was 20 feet from the siren now. And so now I had an idea of what the siren was. And then one night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, it went off. And I was up out of bed, as you can imagine, really quickly. I knew it wasn't the rapture, but something I've been taught that something bad was going to happen. That sometimes when that went off, meant a storm was coming. And sure enough, as soon as that siren went off, the stairs came down. My mom yelled up, "Come on, let's go. We're heading for the basement." And while we were there in the basement, I'm wondering what we're doing in the basement at 12. I grew up in West Virginia in the mountains. We didn't have tornadoes. We had thunder. We loved thunderstorms. I go out on the porch and watch a thunderstorm. Lightning was awesome. But we didn't have tornadoes. I had heard of them, knew what they were, never experienced one. But the siren went off. And we were in the basement. And my mom said the storm's coming. And we waited and waited and waited. And about 10 minutes later, it sounded like giant trains coming down the tracks. And the storm missed our house and hit the house next to us and ripped off the roof and tore out the siding, hit down the road a little bit. And I got to see what a storm was like. Lived through a storm. If it wasn't for my mom in the morning, though, who knows? In Acts chapter 27, we're at the point here, at this point, Paul's in chains. He's heading from Jerusalem to Rome to stand trial in the emperor's court. about 14 or 1,500 miles in a straight line. And if you know anything about sailing vessels at that time, it wasn't a straight line. In this, though, we're starting with verse 13, but I'm going to read verses 10 and 11 before I get down there. Because God sees us through the storm. Paul saw the storm coming. They'd already experienced little high winds in the storm. And Paul told them, this probably isn't going to be a good thing. He was the siren kind of sounding off. And he says this in verse 10. He says, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous. There's a positive attitude for you right there, right? And bring great loss to ship and cargo, and to our own lives also. Verse 11, you've got a centurion named Julius who was kind of in charge of the whole thing, and they got prisoners with them, and Paul is chained probably to him. And it says, verse 11, but the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. And they set out. Well, I began to think about this. The pilot of the ship, his primary thoughts are what? The ship. His primary thoughts are making sure the ship's okay. Then I began to think, not that he doesn't want the cargo to be okay, but that the ship is his home, it's what he wants to do. The owner's primary thoughts are making money. He loves the ship, but he also wants to take care of the cargo. If there are prisoners there, they're probably not the primary thoughts of this guy. So we're going to get to verse 13. God sees us through the storm. Verse 13, we'll read through it and we'll come back. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity to go on. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, called a northeaster, swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of a small island called Calda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. So the men hoisted it aboard. Then they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together, because they were afraid they would run aground on the sandbars of Cyprus. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. Verse 18, we took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard, and with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice. Nice time to say I told you so, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine Paul? Anyway, I'm reading. Here we go. Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood beside me and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. Okay, this is quite a story. And if you read the beginning of the chapter, they're going against the wind. It's just blowing them everywhere. And finally, they get to a point to where, should we go on? And it says, verse 13, when a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. Now, the pilot's an expert. And the owner he owns a ship. So these are men who are used to traveling. So they saw what they thought were fair winds and safe skies, in a sense. It says they saw their opportunity, so they weighed anchor and set sail for the shore of Crete. Verse 14, before long, a wind of hurricane force called a northeaster swept down from the island. Now they're below Crete, they're on the south side of the island. And a huge hurricane force wind come over the island and down and hit them. And we're not talking power boats, we're not talking a huge ship in today's estimate of what it is. We have a sailing ship that is, of course, uses wind, is hit by a huge wind, a hurricane that comes down. Can you imagine the fear that overtook them? I knew what it was like to be in the basement when the tornado came, and I was scared. I had my mom with me, and we were in the basement. She said we were secure as long as we stayed in the basement. You know, as a 12-year-old, I began to think, yeah, the wind's outside, but I got a lot of house above me. If this thing buries me, how do we get out? I began to think of ways of escape from the safe area that I was in. Verse 15, the ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way to it and were driven along. You ever feel like that in life? That there's a storm coming, or you're in the midst of the storm, and it's just so powerful at that time, or the circumstances that you're going through are so powerful at that time that you have nothing else to do but go along with the way it's pushing you. All the time looking for a way out. All the time looking for a safe harbor. All the time looking for a safe place. But it's so strong that you just got to go along with it. I think of financial burdens. There are sometimes financial burdens come and you have no choice but just to go along until you get out of it with work or whatever happens. Verse 16, as we passed to the lee of a small island called Carrollton, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. See, now on this, though, they had a lifeboat. And the lifeboat, if the big boat sinks, the lifeboat is the way we can all get in it, or at least the ones who are in charge can get in it. The important ones, right? Somebody can get in this and get away and be safe. But our way of escape, our way of safety on this very boat is challenged, and we can't even secure it. We've got to bring it in. Verse 17, so the men hoisted it aboard. Then they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. Luke's writing this is amazing as in the detail. So you got this big wooden ship, and they're passing ropes underneath of it to tie it around to make it stronger. Also, as they try to make the boat stronger, to make the bottom so if they hit a sandbar or something, it doesn't shatter. Verse 18, it goes on to say this. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. This is what happens when you, in the midst of a storm, and you don't keep your right mind about you. Remember I talked about the owner of the ship? Their primary thought is that they want to save their cargo. That's their profit. That's the reason why the ship's moving. And they're losing. Well, what can we do? Let's throw the cargo overboard. We're a couple days into it, so I don't know about you, but a storm that lasts a couple days, that's a long storm. I've been in storms in my life like that. And it seems like every day, just when you think you're about ready to get out of it, it churns up again. I've been in a relationship with one of my bosses. And just when I think we've taken care of everything, something new happens and I got to deal with it. And it's like a storm in my life. And it goes on and on and on, and the pressure begins to build and the stress. I don't know if anybody else has ever been through that. Maybe I'm the only one. Been through the stress of in a job. And stress and finances, the stresses that come are like storms. And like I said in verse 18, it says, we took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. Maybe this will work. Well, verse 19, on the third day, still going through the storm, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. Now, the tackle is the stuff they use to operate the ship. Is anybody else here with me thinking that this is just insane? Part of the way they operate the ship and they move different things is by the tackle of the ship, and they begin to throw it overboard. Verse 20, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. I'm sorry to say I've been there. I've been there in my life when I've said, you know what, there's no other way I'm getting out of this. I don't know what we're going to do. Been there. The storms are raging. As a child, I remember dealing with family. In dealing with family, there were times that there were things that I went through as a kid that no kid should go through. And I felt helpless. Where's my help? Where's my refuge in the storm? I've tried everything. Even done some things that I shouldn't have, just because I thought that maybe it'll work. Then a voice of reason stood up. Verse 21. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice and not to sail for Crete. Like I said before, this is Paul going, I told you so. I was trying to tell you that, hey, this is a bad idea. Just hang out for a while. Let's wait for a time that we can go. I'm going to tell you that there's times in each storm that when we get to that point, that before the storm comes, a lot of times, or most of the time, that there is a voice, there is a calming person, that there's a voice, that small voice of God trying to inform us of what we should do and where to lead us, how to guide us, what to do. We just got to listen to Him. And sometimes the voice of God does not go the way the experts are telling us. Remember, the pilot and the owner are experts. It's their ship. Paul's a prisoner. And he's trying to tell them, hey, I don't think we should go. And now he's coming to them and he's telling them by what means he's telling them, the authority that he's coming. And here's where I think it deals with us as individuals and storms in our life. It's the authority by which that still small voice comes. We'll read this again in verse 21. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, then you should have taken my advice and not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. Verse 22, this. But now I urge you to keep your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only this ship will be destroyed. There are some times, though, when the storms come, we're going to have to go through the storm. We're going to have to deal with the outcome. And we're going to survive and make it through it, but we're still going to have to crash. And that's hard for us to take. But because of the authority that Paul's talking about, he said, listen, ultimately you're going to be saved, but in order to be saved, we're going to have to crash. That doesn't make sense, does it? But it's godly sense. He says, last night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, do not be afraid. All throughout the New Testament, I want to tell you this, that when storms come and Jesus is around, the first thing he tells them whenever he comes to them is, do not be afraid. You want to know why? Because he says, I'm here. It's me. The storms that we go through and we feel like we're going to have to crash, you know what? If God says you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay. And we have to trust in that. Those times I was talking about as a child, I remember being in the church. And we only had 2 rows of pews in the church. I went back. And my spot was right here. Second row back, right in the corner. This was where my refuge was when I came to church. And when the storms were going all around, I remember hearing God's voice saying, you're going to be okay. But you got to surrender to me. See, that's what Paul was telling them. He's saying, listen, the more you try to do under your own power, the worse it's going to get. I've been told by God himself that we're going to be saved. We're going to live through this. But you're going to have to trust him. You're going to have to trust him. And there was times when I was a child and I would sit there and I would go, God, I need to trust you. And pretty soon that song, Just As I Am, when we played that one. I don't know why that one, or Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. Is your all on the altar of sacrifice laid? Anybody remember those? And the songs would play, and God would pull on my heart, and I'd have to go surrender. And pretty soon, the reason I think I set the second pew back is it was a shorter trip to the altar. Because I needed a chance to grab a hold of something, and we get that white knuckle syndrome. We grab a hold of the pew in front of us, and we go, God's calling me, but I've got a hold of it. And I'm secure right here. And I grab it so hard, my knuckles will turn white. See, that was me trying to take care of it. Just like these men in the ship. They'd already thrown over the cargo. They'd already thrown over the tackle. They were at their wits' end. They forgot to eat for several days. Paul came to them with a voice of reason, a calming voice. He says, but now I urge you to keep your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Talks about glad that the angel of God came to him. In verse 24 it said, do not be afraid. It says, you must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. Paul is saying, listen, God has got all of you surrounded. He's got his arms around all of you. In verse 25 he says one more time. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Now for us, as we're going through this and we read God's word, we hear from God and different things, we have got to trust in the words from God. Now he had things for them to do. He wanted them to eat, to gain strength, so they could swim when they hit the ground. You go and read the rest of the chapter, it is. They hit a sandbar and the ship was torn apart. And they had to swim. Then after verse 25, after he tells them to take courage from return, in verse 26, he says, nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. Now, I don't know what everybody's going through, because I tell you what, as soon as we all think we're going right, something begins to go wrong, and that northeaster comes in our lives. And I don't know where you are in that. Sometimes we got to go through the storm, but God sees us and walks and carries us through it. I don't want us to react like the men and start just throwing stuff overboard that we may need later. Nevertheless, we must run aground. God says, I got you. But you got to go through it. And when we come out on the other side of that, when we've surrendered to God, when we said, God, you've got me, in the net that you put out, the arms that you, whatever you want to say, when God, you've got me. When the storm subsides and I come out on the other side, not only am I stronger, but it is amazing to me how many people were watching me go through the storm. On this day, we've watched the news, we've seen stuff on the internet and all that kind of stuff as far as the storms that are going on, the storm that went on in Houston and the other one that's coming in the East Coast and all the storms that come, they're going to keep coming. Storms are always going to be there. As they're coming, how we grow, how we react, if we survive, depends upon our surrender to the one who's in charge. And today I felt like in going through this and reading through this, for me, it laid on my heart that there's a lot of people that are going through different storms right now. And they've got to go through them to the end. But God wants them to know, He wants you guys to know that He's with you, that He surrounds you, and that you are going to survive. And after you survive and come out on the other side, you will be stronger. And the people around you will look and be amazed at the faith that you have and how you handle that. Let's go to prayer. Precious God, as we come to you, I just thank, dear Jesus, of all the people that are still going through the storms down in Houston and surrounding areas. Father, be with them. Surround those families. Lord, and for those of us who are going through a storm in our life, maybe it is with the job. Maybe it's just with finances. Maybe it's a relationship here. Whatever it is, your God. Precious Lord, when we're in those storms, when we focus on the storm, they're so violent. And we can become afraid. Precious God, I pray that you will bring somebody into our lives and that we can hear your voice, dear Jesus, either through the calming presence of one of your people or directly, dear God, from you. That we can hear, dear God, that your calming presence and realize as long as we stay surrendered to you, no matter what happens to the vessel around us, that you got us. Precious Lord, surround us, keep us. Guard our hearts, guard our minds, guard our actions, dear God. May we sound like you, think like you, and act like you in all that we do. In your precious and sweet name we pray.